Mark, and I get to be the lead pastor here. Welcome to you. Glad we can be together on Martin Luther King weekend. Welcome everybody online, on demand, on mission with us, or in the Poconos, or somewhere sick. Anyway, we're glad that we can be healthy and be in the same room, whatever that room might look like. Like Rachel said, we are studying the book of Philippians right now. Let me go ahead and just jump us right into that passage. You can find that. You can find that on the screens. You can read along with me, or if you have a Bible, you can open that or open up an app and follow along. Short passage, one of my favorites. Starting in verse 8, Philippians chapter 1. God can testify how I long for all of you with the affection of Christ Jesus. And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best, and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. So I'm going to kind of blow you away here on a moment. I'm going to name drop. I'm going to name drop like a champ, all right? If you know me, you know that I really enjoy music. And I enjoy music so much that I like to sing, and it's not an uncommon thing for me to just be kind of wandering around the office and just start singing, and then all of a sudden realize I'm not alone, and I'm a distraction. My singing is a distraction for more than one reason, and I'll just kind of stop mid-line because I'm just kind of embarrassed about the whole thing. But my family's come to know this, and they know that I sing. I sing, that I just enjoy singing. Along the way, I've gotten some helpful feedback. Kathleen, at one point in time, said to me, she said, "Hey, you know those times in worship where like the song's really, really good, and you just want to sing louder?" She says, "Yeah, don't do that. You just don't do that for all of our sake. Let's not do that. When it comes to worship, your contribution is making a joyful noise. So just lean into the joy, and if you can keep down the noise, it'll be better for everybody. All right. So the truth is, though I love to sing, I just can't. I just can't, and it's one of those things I wish I could. If I had something I could really do well, I wish that was it. My family's got better genes. Kathleen and my oldest Kelsey, they've been on stages and they have sung, and they're great at it. And Kelsey has had vocal instructions before and decided to give me a gift. I think it was a birthday, it might have been a Father's Day, of 2 singing lessons. And so several years back, I went to this voice instructor twice, and I really enjoyed it. It was a great experience, and I learned a lot. It was a great couple lessons. And what I found out on my way out the door is that voice coach, that voice teacher, had also taught the actress Emma Stone. Now, you might know Emma Stone, award-winning actress from La La Land, all right? So if you've seen La La Land, but she's been in a bunch of shows, but she has sung professionally. And the way I kind of took it is that, like, since then, since we had the same voice instructor, like, Emma and I, we're kind of like the same. I think, about 14 inches taller than her and probably twice her weight. But beyond that, when it comes to singing, we have the same pedigree. We have the same pedigree. We have the same voice instructor. And so, like, in so many ways, it's like we have this bond. We have this bond. We're kind of the same. Like, we're in that very same world. And because, we've got roots together, right? And so, and I remind, when my family reminds me of my vocal insufficiencies, I tell them, look, you don't understand my pedigree. You don't understand where I come from. Now, here's the thing, though. If we went and got a special investigator to investigate the difference between Emma Stone's singing ability and my singing ability, I have not gotten the credit that she has gotten, even though we have the same pedigree. My guess is that the special investigator would come back with the results that would suggest this, that her accolades come back to a deeper investment in the craft than I have made. And that's true. They would probably also say that she has genes that enable her to do, like a genetic system that enables her to be able to sing better than I do. And that is why she has gotten way more accolades when it comes to singing than I have. And if that was the case, I believe that would be fair. I bring all of this up because we are in a series starting in the first part of the book of Philippians that is anchored by this simple promise, that we can be confident in this, that he who began a good work in us will carry it on to completion in the day of Christ Jesus. So what's different between me and my Kelsey and Kathleen is that they've got genes, they have genetic ability to sing that I don't have. And when they put effort into it, it means they can sing really nicely. And the same is true of Emma Stone. Spiritually speaking, you have the same spiritual genetic code that Moses, that David, that Jesus, that Peter and Paul were given. And if that is true, that you can be confident that God is doing a good work in your life, and he's going to carry it on to completion, that when faith is born in your life, you are given that genetic code. And not only are you given that genetic code, you're given God himself. He shows up in your life, and he is now going to be your sort of spiritual life coach, guide, and he is committed to finishing what he has started, and he will finish, even though he might have an awful lot of work to do at the end. He is going to finish the work he started. And what is true is that you have everything you need spiritually to grow and enjoy more of that sooner than later. In fact, the passage that we talked about is a prayer that is a simple prayer that, yes, God is doing this work in our lives, but we can experience it more, and we can experience it more now with just a little bit of focus and effort. So what I'd like to do is kind of get us into the mind of Paul. Paul could have prayed a lot of things for the Philippians. Paul has a relationship with the Philippians. He helped start this church. He went on other missionary journeys, but stayed in touch with them and has a very warm relationship. That's why he says, I long for you. I have the affection of Christ Jesus. I have a love for you. I want to be near you. I want to be close to you. He cares for them deeply, and he wants their best. And because he wants their best, he prayed a very specific prayer. In his mind, what he wants for them is he wants them to experience what would be known as spiritual fruitfulness. I worked really, really hard for about 10 minutes to create a graphic that I'd like to show you right now. All right, so it's a simple tree. All right, and it took me an awful lot of effort. And this is a picture of basically how things work organically. You have a fruit there, and it's attached to a beautiful tree, and the tree is rooted into the ground. Now, we have flourished as humanity when it comes to our abilities technologically. We have put people on the moon. We've developed iPads. We've got computers. We've got computers that can think. There's an app out there that can write an essay. We have artificial intelligence. We have all these things. We have never synthetically created a fruit, an apple. We can't do that. What we can do is we can efficiently see them grow, but all spiritual growth, none of it can be manufactured. It's almost entirely organic. We can't dial up China or India and say, look, I need a lot of apples. Can you make me some synthetic apples? There's no such thing as a synthetic apple. It's an organic thing, and it grows. Same thing with our spiritual life. We can't fake it. Now, we might try to fake the Christian life and act like things are going really well on the outside in, But Paul's whole thing is if you want to understand your Christian life and you want to experience more of it and more love and joy and peace, all those things, it's an organic process. And so in his mind, he's like, I want you to think of fruitfulness. And everybody likes a tree that produces fruit, right? What do? You can do more to enable, there's apple orchards out there that figure out how to produce more apples. It's not by addressing the leaves. It's not by doing anything with the bark. It's putting seed in the ground and tending to the soil around the roots. You put good soil around the roots, you're going to get good fruit. If you don't address the soil around the roots, you don't get good fruit. It is the process. And what Paul's saying is that what he wants for the Philippians, he wants them to have the fruit of righteousness in their life. He said, I would love for you to have a conscience that's pure and blameless. I would like you to have a life that's free from mistakes and sins and all the damage and the shame and the guilt that goes along with all of that. I would like all of those things for you. I would like your life to be filled with the fruit of wisdom. Fruits that come from a wise life, a life of someone who is secure in who they are. And I'd love for that to be a legacy that goes from one generation to the next, that expands beyond your own life and touches other people's lives. I would love spiritual fruitfulness for you. And because of that, or because of his desire for that, he prays something very, very specific. He prays a root kind of prayer. He prays that the inward part of their lives would be aligned and nourished and healthy in such a way that they'd be fruitful. The passage simply says that, at the back end of the passage, he says, I pray this thing so that you may be filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ. All of those things. What does he pray? He prays for them. He says, look, he prays, God, would you enable their love to abound more and more in knowledge and in depth of insight. If we grow in our love and our knowledge and depth of insight, we can make our worlds better. We can make the worlds of other people's lives better. We can make the world around us better. We can affect generation to generation. And Paul could have prayed for a lot of things, but he prayed for three specific things: that our love would grow, along with our knowledge and our discernment. In this passage, it says depth of insight. If you get with the scholars, they're like, well, maybe it's not depth; it might be breadth of insight. But some translations will say, hey, it's discernment. I just have a little simple Venn diagram that just kind of shows how these three things go together. That your love may abound more and more in knowledge and discernment, so that what? This passage says that you may be able to discern what is best. When you're a kid, you're just focused in on doing what's right or wrong when you feel like it. But as we mature in life, we begin deciding not between what's right and wrong, but between what's good and what's better and what's best. Oftentimes, we have so many good things in our lives, it's hard to know what is best. But if we do, we can walk into, a fruitful life. It's Martin Luther King weekend, and it's a good time to sit back and see how his life enabled his vision to happen. He certainly had a vision that things needed to change when it came to race, particularly in the South. He had a vision around that. He was hopeful about it, and his idea was this needs to happen, not through a messy protest, but a peaceful protest. And he had many threats of violence against him. There's threats of violence against him. There's threats of violence against his followers. And it was an ugly and awful process. But they continued to call themselves back to the example of Jesus, who was also abused and oppressed, but did not push back with violence. It was his character and his discernment to know what is best that led a process that changed our country in significant ways. It was these inward root things that gave him the strength of character to face all sorts of pushback. He faced a lot of pushback by people in the church. Other churches that were pushing back on his preaching, pushing back on his methodologies. But his life and his character, the issues at the root of who he is, enabled him to bear fruit that changed this world. And that could be true of every single one of us. It doesn't come by performing well on the outside, though. It comes by character shaped over time. And so when Paul speaks of this, he says there's some specific things that he wants us to think about. Our love, knowledge, and our discernment. Now, it's not hard to see how love will be important when it comes to our character. Love is the way we attach to God and what we attach ourselves to. And when we grow in our love for God and understanding of God, we attach well to him. The Old Testament is filled with all sorts of stories of the people of God attaching to all sorts of other gods and idols and really just wrecking their own spiritual faith. Why? Because their love sent them in directions that weren't helpful. Solomon was famous, the wisest man on earth, right? But he had lots of women, and what they do, his love for them dragged him away to other gods. And his idolatry to the other gods had consequences. It had fruit in the life of the nation, in the life of his children. His idolatry was absolutely destructive because he got the love wrong. Now, I want to show you a photo of somebody I think has deep love and affection. This is a football fan. And clearly he looks like he might be a Vikings fan, which means that it looks like he's outside in the winter in Minnesota, but he is so passionately committed to it. I don't doubt the man's love. I do doubt his knowledge and discernment, though. Would I want my son to be like him? I don't think so. This is not what I want for someone. But is he somebody who loves well? Yes. Love is great. And, we live in a world where people say, look, people should be able to love what, whom, and how they please, right? And if love is the only thing that matters, you need to hold back on any sort of condemnation of those who would worship Allah. Right? Because people might love Allah, and their love for Allah in Islam will also call them to continue to perpetuate the oppression of women and all sorts of other things. Those who love the gods of Hinduism, their love for those gods will continue to perpetuate the oppression of millions, if not billions, of people because of the affection to that way of being. Love is important. But love without any constraint, well, it's not helpful. Knowledge has to step in also. The scriptures say, guard your heart above all things, for it's the wellspring of life. It can lead you in all sorts of directions. And you guard it with knowledge. The scripture says that there are true things and there are not true things in life. And yes, we could talk about who gets to interpret this or that or the other, but if there is a God, there are true things and there are things that are not true. But our knowledge shapes our love. A lot of marriage counseling, and when you're working with a couple, with couples that have sort of lost their edge or struggling with lots of tension, lots of conflict, most counselors, what they start out with, and the Gottman Institute just does this, we're just going to start having this couple find out things about their lives. What happens with a marriage is that you get two people who are running down the road at 80 miles an hour, and they're just, because they're constantly pulling off life, all their communication is about pulling off life, and you go weeks, months, years, and you don't even know the basic information. You don't even know the names of the people that your spouse works with. You don't know what that person thinks about those people. You don't know what's going on in their hearts and minds. You don't know the storylines. You don't know their tensions. You don't know their fears. You don't know the things that are causing them to get angry. You don't know the things that are causing them to get upset. And what ends up happening because you don't know those things? You constantly hurt each other. Why? Because you just don't know what you don't know. And because you don't know those things, you constantly step in it. And because you're constantly stepping in it, you're constantly making a mess. A lot of times, love just comes back to let's just get to know each other again. Without knowledge, it's really difficult to have love. Loving God is going to mean knowing about him. Now, here's the thing. If you only have knowledge and you don't have love or discernment, you get C-3PO. All right? Does everybody know who C-3PO is? All right, C-3PO is the smartest being, if you want to call him a being, in Star Wars. He knows like 6 point something or other million languages, right? He knows every single language. And he can always calculate the percentage cost and the likelihood of failure in any given situation. Clearly he's the smartest one there, but he's a robot, so therefore he cannot love, and he has no discernment. So every single movie, the best part of C-3PO is that every single movie, he does something really stupid and loses a limb. He loses his arm, or he loses his leg, or he gets his head cut off. My favorite part of the new series is when he comes to Luke Skywalker, and he says, "You might not recognize me because of my red arm." He has a new red arm attached to him. Why? Because that always happens with him. Why? Why does he always lose a limb? Because he's got no wisdom, he's got no discernment, and he always makes mistakes, which is the third aspect of this, is discernment. You can have love and you can have knowledge, but discernment is what brings these things together. It understands how things kind of fit together, how people fit together. The scriptures oftentimes use the word wisdom, and I think that is, in some ways, the best way to understand how discernment works. Right? Because you can be really, really smart like C-3PO, or you can have an awful lot of love like that shirtless football fan, but discernment knows, maybe you should put on a sweater, discernment knows how to not get your arm cut off. But the trick about discernment is that it helps you figure out what to know and why it matters. My favorite example of this is in the scriptures. Proverbs is, if you're new to the scriptures, it's famously understood as sort of like the source of wisdom and what you might say discernment in the scriptures. So I'm just going to read 2 verses from the book of Proverbs and see if you can tell me the summary of their teaching, all right? Proverbs 26 verse 4 says this. It says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes." Well, which is it? Should I answer the fool according to his folly? Well, if I do that, I'll be just like him. But if I don't answer the fool according to his folly, well, then he's going to be wise in his own eyes. Well, which is it? And why did the Bible just stick these 2 verses together, right? They could have just separated them and we could have we wouldn't have noticed. Well, why did he put it together like that? Well, which is it? Well, you need to be discerning and you need to be wise. And wisdom and discernment comes through a process, right? If discernment didn't matter when you were hiring somebody, you would just, and knowledge is all that mattered, you would just go to the schools and say, "Send me the test scores of your top students. Send me the test scores of your top students," and you would just take the test scores and then you would you'd send offer letters to the top 10 scores of the college graduates. You wouldn't interview them. Why? Because the only thing that really matters is knowledge. No. You want to talk to them. You want to look at them. You want to know if they can discern. And these 3 things, when they come together, make a difference. And we can grow in these things. Let's just take one more example. Let's just say you have discernment and knowledge, but you don't have any love. What do you have in a situation like that? Well, there's no such thing as somebody not having love. So let's just say somebody doesn't have any love for another person. You'd probably have a narcissist, somebody who's been motivated to get a lot of information and a lot of skill at life. But because of some early childhood wounding, they don't know how to attach to another person or God. And so they have a pathology, maybe it's narcissism, sociopath. And they've got lots of skills, right? But no basic attachment to other people in order to apply it. We don't condemn these people and say these people are awful people, but you do protect the world from them, and you do protect themselves from the world by giving them highly structured environments to not break something because of their lack of ability to attach. All right? Paul's prayer for us is that if we grew together in this, we could have a better life, and we could make a better world. He prayed these things specifically. And my suggestion is that we could grow in these things. And as we grow in these things, we could produce better lives. We can have a stronger connection to God. We can make a difference in the world we live in. And I want to offer a couple practical applications on this. But I want to kind of root it into something that Kobe Bryant was known to say. And you can overlook the attitude of this, but he said, look, people call me the greatest basketball player in the world, but they don't realize that I'm the greatest basketball player in the world because I am the person in the world who's most interested in just the simple practices of basketball. And basically what he's saying is like I am more committed to becoming a better dribbler, becoming a better passer, and a better shooter. And when it comes to our faith, Paul prays that these things would become real, that love, knowledge, and discernment would become real to us. But there's no sort of mystery like skill out there. There's sort of like no mystery mantra. There's no mystery retreat. There's no mystery thing that happens. It happens in our lives through very simple, basic things. And this is the things that have always worked for the people of God that I just kind of want to put in front of you. And you might have been walking with God for a very long time and you've heard some of these things. And you might say, you know what, that's a good reminder, I should do this. If you are brand new to the faith, I'm not introducing you to something like that from a secret guru. These are just things that Christians have done for a long time. And when we do these things, we grow in our understanding of God, and our lives and the lives of others can get better because of it. The first thing I want to suggest to you is to simply memorize a verse. In fact, I want you to practice it right now. Every single one of you got like a little card when you came in with a pen. I'm going to put the verse up, and I'm going to show you how I memorize a verse. Put the verse up. The way I memorize a verse is I write it down. All right? Go back to, Odd, if you don't mind, just go back to the original passage that we read in the beginning. And if you want, you can skip the God can testify. Just start with this. And this is my prayer. Go ahead, grab your pen, and just write this down. If you write this down 4 to 5 times, you will probably memorize it. I've memorized verses over the years, and the way I memorize it is I just kind of write it down. I write it down several times, and then I'll just remind myself of it. A lot of times I'll write it down, I'll just kind of stick it in my car, in my visor, and I'll read it at red lights or whatever. I'll stick it on my mirror when I'm getting ready, and I'll remind myself of that verse. And then I will think about it, and I'll think about it and apply it. And as I start thinking about applying it, I begin seeing it happen in my regular life. And you might be like, hey, I've memorized verses before. Maybe you've memorized this before. This might sound over the top, but maybe you'd want to try to memorize the entire book of Philippians. It's 100 verses about. You probably could do it. Somebody challenged me to do that several years ago, and I almost did it. I got myself into chapter 4, and I don't know, might have had a kid or something. I lost the whole of the project. But for years, The investment of time and energy. And it wasn't like an over-the-top time. It's not like I was like not watching my favorite television show to do this. I was just layering it on to something I was already doing, whether I was working out. I remember I had one of those Nordic tracks, and I had like a chapter of it. And I would just do that, and I would just remind myself of some things that are true. You could do that. A friend of mine memorized the entire book of Romans, and it did an awful lot of spiritual good for him. Maybe you'd pick a project like that, memorize an entire passage. Secondly, a way to grow your love is to really think about your attachments. All the simple things, right? If you want to grow in your love for God, you show up and you worship Him regularly. The more you worship Him, the more you understand His love, the more you experience His love, the more you're able to extend love. The two sides of that is, when you think about love, you don't want to necessarily think about, I wouldn't necessarily go back to your Hallmark Christmas movies to think about love. Think about the different ways God's loved you. One of the ways that love grows is through attachment. If science says this, if two people go out to lunch and one person buys lunch for the other person, it's not going to be the person who had the lunch purchased for them that's going to have the greater attachment after that lunch. That's not how it works. The person with a greater attachment to the other person after that lunch is the person that bought the lunch. You want to grow your love, give. You want to grow your love, serve. Find ways to give yourself to your spouse or to your kids or to those you care about. Give yourself to the community. If you want to love your community, find ways to give time to it. Find a charity that you want to give to. Affection follows action. Third, you can grow your knowledge by simply just reading the scriptures. If you've fallen out of the habit of reading the scriptures, that's happened to me before. My simple way back to going back to reading the scriptures is reading one chapter a day. I'll just start with one book of the Bible, and if you've done it before, maybe you'll start with the Psalms, and you could pray those Psalms. But just read one chapter. You don't have to figure it all out. If you want to take it to the next level, one of the things I try to do when I'm reading through the Bible is I'll try to underline one verse that makes sense to me. If you don't have a habit of that, you can start really easily. And what I'm not asking for is 45 minutes. But one chapter a day is going to get your mind thinking about who God is. It's going to get you connected to God. It's going to grow your understanding of Him. It's going to give you His questions for this world rather than this world's questions for who He is. Fourth, if you want to grow your discernment and your wisdom, it means you need to have other people who are speaking into your life. You grow your discernment through connection. Because all knowledge is interpreted, right? If you get all of your knowledge through a certain cable news station, right? They're going to give you a spin, and they're going to tell you, here's the 5 ways you should be angry about life, and you're going to leave your life angry all the time. Why? Because they're the only people speaking into your life. One of the reasons why we do small groups is that we just can't do life alone. And if we're by ourselves, it's going to be so hard to do it by ourselves. We need other people in our life. We need to see how other people see God in this world. We need to see how other people see us and experience us. We need to be able to open ourselves up and talk about the things that are challenging to us. One of the reasons why we do Group Connect is we want to make it easy for you to step into a group. But one of the best ways to grow in your discernment and your spiritual discernment is be around other spiritually discerning people as well. And what that means is the fifth thing. It's just simply humility. One of the essential aspects of discernment is being humble enough to say, I don't have all the knowledge, and I'm not the loving person I could be. There's more that I can learn, and there's more that I can grow, and there are other people who can help me. If you have it all together, then you probably don't need any other people in your life. And if you're fully loving, you probably don't need to experience love from others. But the truth is, we all need this. Jesus needed it. Jesus lived his life in community, lived his life humbly. He had other voices in his life. He had the voice of the Father that he submitted to. He read the scriptures. These are the kind of things that enabled him to have a life that changed things. This is the kind of life that enabled Martin Luther King. He wasn't a perfect man, and he's got some big flaws, right? But collectively, it gave him the love, the knowledge, and discernment to see a fruitful life emerge. And man, what would that be like for us? Back to my BFF, Emma Stone. Imagine if the United States Olympic Committee came to your house, knocked on the door, and they said, hey, we've been doing a genetic survey of our entire nation, and we've determined that you have the genetic code, the exact genetic code of somebody who we believe that can win the Olympic marathon. So we are inviting you to come to the Olympic headquarters in order to begin training now to win the Olympic gold. And we think you should do it because there's nobody else in this world we think that could win and set the record like you. You would feel a certain stewardship and responsibility to step into that very thing, right? Well, that's true of you spiritually. You have the very genetic code of Jesus, and you can live a life that reflects his life. It really is. It can be true. You're not going to earn his love. That's not how it works. Grace isn't opposed to earning. Grace is opposed to earning, but it isn't opposed to effort. With a little bit of focus, you could step into his kind of life and the kind of spiritual fruitfulness that his life would produce. Would you stand with me and we'll pray, and then we will practice that love. We will practice that affection and see how God works in our life. Jesus, we thank you for your life given to us. Jesus, we know that you are fully bought into us. You didn't just buy us lunch, you bought our souls. You didn't buy us lunch for $10, you bought our souls with your life. We know that your affection is full and you are all in with us. Thank you that we can trust in your promise that the good work you've begun in us, you're going to carry it on to completion. And God, we want to trust that our focus, our efforts on this can see that process move forward in real significant ways. We want the fruitful life that you would give us. And so, God, even as we leave here, we can't do all of these things, but if there's one specific thing you're calling us to do, would you just kind of put that on our hearts and give us the grace and the strength to step into this life that is truly a life that we have in you. In your name we pray. Amen.